Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of To Play or Not to Play. This series will cover various aspects of games in detail and break them down into one of two categories. As you may have surmised, these categories are play and don't play. A game that has more points under play will be more worth your time and money, while likewise, a game that has more points under don't play will be less worth both your time and your money. I started this series to get away from the traditional rating systems or reviews, which are difficult to gauge since one person's 5 is another person's 10. For today's episode, we'll be covering Castlevania, Lords of Shadow. Castlevania is one of the longest running game series in existence. The very first game in the series was titled Castlevania Vampire Killer, and this was released in 1986. Since then, there have been a total of 39 games related to Castlevania released. That is a huge number of games, and it's no wonder that the series typically has a very dedicated following. With Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 just around the corner, the number of games is about to jump up to 40 in total. That is quite an achievement for any series. However, with that in mind, the Lords of Shadow series is a reboot. Over time, the storyline has gotten very convoluted in the Castlevania series, until the developers decided to go back to the very beginning and start anew. So how does Lords of Shadow stand up? Well, let's jump in and find out. As the game begins, we're quickly introduced to our main character, Gabriel Belmont, as he heads right into battle. The opening cutscene is moody and impressive. They do a great job of not wasting any time and getting straight to the action. Your first battle pretty much is a glorified tutorial, but allows you an opportunity to try things out and learn the basics of combat. There's no real way for you to fail here, but if you do somehow manage to fail, then this is going to be a rather painful experience for you, as the game has large spikes in difficulty as it progresses. This is the era before Dracula, and in this time, a shadow has fallen over the land that has caused the people to lose hope. A prophecy known of by the Brotherhood of Light speaks of a pure-hearted individual that will defeat the Lords of Shadow and return the light to the world. This turns out to be good old Gabriel. His order sends him on a quest to the Lake of Oblivion, and it's here that he finds out about the Lords of Shadow and how he must acquire their powers. So he sets out on his quest slaying lycans, vampires, trolls, giant spiders, and a bunch of other creatures along the way. The story is a compelling one, but I found a number of issues with how it was told. First of all, Zobek, who is voiced by Patrick Stewart, never really quite fits into the game in my opinion.
The stench of the bog fades into memory, and a land of great beauty lies before him, a paradise where nature lives in harmony with all living creatures. Indeed, a refuge.
He not only voices Zobek, but he also does the narration parts along the way. Some people may disagree with me on this, but I always think of Star Trek or X-Men when I hear his voice. It just doesn't really fit into a fantasy setting in my opinion, so I was always torn out of the moment when he was talking. If he was narrating a children's story, I think he would fit in perfectly there, but not so much in one about Dracula. Next, the actual cutscenes are usually very abbreviated. Someone will just appear out of nowhere.
Give me your dagger, quickly!
And Gabriel has no reaction to this whatsoever, as if he just expected them to be there, which always bothered me. And then there's times where people say or do things and it's never elaborated on. This bothers me the most because every time I started to get into the story, they would have a cutscene and then something would be left out or it would abruptly end and I would just be left there wondering, What the hell is going on? So while the story progresses, Gabriel continues to fight monsters of all shapes and sizes, and defeating the Lords of Shadow along the way. He grows more powerful with each one he defeats, and more of the story is revealed. I won't spoil the latter half of the game, but there are some twists and turns along the way. However, the story never really surprises me. It's not something we haven't seen before, and with the clunky way the developers told the story, it does suffer for it. Also, there is literally a 5-minute long monologue at the end of the game. Yeah, and this is where the so-called bad guy reveals the entirety of his plot and all of the bad things that he did unbeknownst to Gabriel. Honestly, this was a bit terrible, as monologues are never good storytelling. I wish they had put some more effort into the story along the way to reveal things in bits and pieces, so they could fill in the blanks at the end rather than having a rather tiring monologue inserted at the end to explain everything. With all that being said, the story is in fact the main reason to play this game, so Castlevania Lords of Shadow gets 1 point for play. However, it also gets 1 point under Don't Play for the awkward cutscenes, unexplained story, and the lack of explanations that so often plague the game. Now let's go ahead and jump into the gameplay. The Castlevania series is notorious for its brutal difficulty, especially in the early games. Lords of Shadow continues that trend and offers very challenging combat. This is a thinker's combat system, meaning that you need to plan attacks, pay attention to what your enemies are doing, and either dodge or block at just the right time. Of course, there is an easy difficulty mode, and this is much more forgiving for new players. If you haven't played a Castlevania game before, then I recommend starting with easy and working your way up from there. If you're playing on a PC, my absolute recommendation is not to play this game without a controller. Whether you utilize an Xbox 360 controller or a PS3 controller with motion joy drivers, like I do, you'll have a much better time if you use one of the above. This game was not designed with a mouse and keyboard in mind, and it suffers for it. The controls are clunky and awkward when using a mouse and keyboard, and it nearly ruins the game. So unless you have no other choice, use a controller. Once you've gotten that established, you'll find that the combat system is quite deep. There's a large number of combos, a dual magic system that makes use of light and shadow magic, and it feels very well put together. You can fight on the ground or in the air, pull enemies towards you in midair, or even pull yourself towards a larger enemy. And if you chain all of your combos together well, then you can truly unleash havoc on the battlefield. Boss battles all present a unique challenge and help keep the game fun. However, the bane of PC gamers everywhere makes an appearance in this game: quick time events. Personally, I've always hated these. They don't add anything to the game and scream lazy design. What they end up doing more often than not is breaking your immersion and slowing down the gameplay. Either show a cutscene or have us fight something, but don't combine both. Smashing random buttons in the middle of a cutscene while the characters awkwardly pause is never an enjoyable experience. QTE. Another QTE. When game developers do these, it's almost always for console players, so hopefully someday we won't have to deal with these anymore on PC. Like the other games in this series, there's also a large amount of platforming, hidden items, and puzzles. These were probably my least favorite parts of the game, especially the parts that required you to backtrack after you received a certain upgrade before you could unlock something. The platforming itself is typically fine, though it can be difficult at times to figure out where you need to go because things you can climb on usually blend in with the background or are obscured by other terrain or even the camera. Speaking of the camera, I had some real problems with how they utilized it throughout the game. There would be times where the camera was behind you, but all of a sudden it will snap to the front after a certain point, which is extremely disorienting. Instead of designing the game with the camera either free or kept behind you, it hops all over the place like a goddamn rabbit. There's times where I genuinely felt frustrated with the angles they forced on me. Puzzles are nothing to write home about. They're usually pretty simple to figure out, and honestly, I felt they were mostly a waste of time. There was little fun to be had in doing them, and I felt that the game would have been better off if they were left out entirely. Because the gameplay section is so large, this gets multiple points. The combat gets a point under play, but 3 points go under don't play for the QTEs, camera, and the puzzles. Make no mistake about it. This game has some technical issues, which can most definitely be a showstopper for some players. So let's hop into the graphics now. One thing that struck me right from the beginning was how gorgeous this game was on PC, even for a 2-year-old game. They have some beautiful raindrop effects that actually add to immersion without being annoying, and the world and creatures within it are quite a sight to behold. The graphics on consoles are about average, but this game really shines on PC. If you're looking for maximum immersion, then you owe it to yourself to play this game on a proper PC, as you lose quite a bit of detail on a console. I thought the texture work was quite good, the cutscenes were really well done, and the animations were pretty fluid, so this game gets a point under play for its fantastic graphics. Last, but not least, let's talk about the sound. They brought some excellent talent on board for the voice actors, and the recording was top notch. I expressed my opinions above on what I thought of Patrick Stewart, but I also have some complaints about Robert Carlyle as Gabriel. One of my major problems with Gabriel is that he speaks so softly and without emotion that, at times, it's really difficult for me to care about him.
Who are you?
I am Gabriel. I have traveled here seeking the Guardian of the Lake.
You are from the Order? They sent you?
How do I find him?
Hell, there's even some cutscenes where the background music nearly drowns out his voice. I would have liked to see a wider range of emotion from Carlyle to add depth to his character. The music, however, is top-notch. The soundtrack really adds to the atmosphere and makes those epic battles even more epic. Most of the emotion that you get out of this game comes from the music, which is always a good sign. I quite enjoyed the boss music as it made each encounter a truly epic affair. For sound, I give 1 point under play for the music and 1 point under don't play for the voiceovers. While I feel the talent itself was good, the major issues come from the voice director and the fact that some of the actors really just don't fit the roles they play very well. So, let's wrap this up. The total score for Castlevania Lords of Shadow is 4 points under play and 5 points under don't play. This was a tough one to judge, as the game has so many good points, but you can't notice the good without also seeing the bad, and there's bad around every corner. A bit more polish, some better design decisions, a bit better direction, and this would have easily been 9 points in play and 0 in don't play. I really feel like the developers were struggling with the game development in several areas while designing the game, so it's my hope that with the sequel coming out in February, they will have worked out the kinks from the first game. At this point, the decision comes down to you. As you can see from the point distribution, if you are interested in the story and combat, then those are your main reasons to play the game. However, if you feel the technical issues are going to take away too much from your experience, then you should avoid this game and go on to the next one, no questions asked. The game can be long at times and very drawn out, which makes for a less exciting experience. With problematic design decisions along the way, it's very easy to lose interest in the game. But, if the story is your thing, then you should stick with it, as you will be rewarded for your experiences at the end of the game. Anyway, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of To Play or Not to Play. This is Striketh, checking out.